Right, so can you enable share?
But I'll just start recording there.
Great, great. So I'll try not to swear as much. All right, so I'm going to share content.
Should be, yeah, perfect.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're talking about is like how do you structure the beginning of like your studies, right? And like what would be useful for someone to know just coming into a program like Carnegie Mellon. Timeline, I think, is the most important, right? So when do you're about to start the pre-MFE, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of like going to be a timeline of the first, call it the first, well, actually, let's just do the whole thing. So here's year one. This is August. And this would be like different for schools that have a different one. This is just kind of the structure for Carnegie Mellon. And these squiggly lines are, jobs, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's most surprising for me was with Carnegie Mellon, the sell side recruiting starts about here. So what does that mean? That means like Fidelity, for example, is buy side, but they're already recruiting heavily for the summer internships. And but all the sell side banks are starting really heavily. And the question is, well, how the hell do I apply to them if I haven't been in the program and I don't really know anything? The answer is yes. That's a good question. I went whole hog and applied to these, even though it's totally not appropriate for me because I'm mid-career. A lot of the sell side jobs are entry level, which is great if you're coming out in MFE. However, it's like a pipeline, like they're going to go to Carnegie Mellon, NYU, Cornell, UCLA, kind of like all the top programs, and be like, okay, I need 3 students for risk management. I need 10 for strats. I need and they're going to kind of go through and they have slots to fill. It's like a yearly process for them, and it's just kind of part of their business because they have people transitioning off the desks, getting promoted, going to the buy side. So for the sell side, the recruiting starts early, and there's 2 strategies. If you're well prepared, you can start applying right away and hopefully get in the process. If you're not well prepared, you kind of get one shot for applying for a lot of these firms. So it might be good to take the first month and really prepare yourself. Don't let them freak you out in terms of like, well, you got to apply now. No, I mean, it's better. The earlier, the better for sure. But you should really be prepared. What does it mean to be prepared? So for the sell side, there's a lot of brain teasers in their interviews. And most of the interviews are now online where you'll be doing some sort of video interview to begin with. They might ask like brain teasers in the video interviews. I didn't encounter that a lot. Of course, I never really made it through the first rounds or anything. So that's an issue.
And
But
how would you prepare for them?
what's that?
How did you actually prepare for the brain teasers themselves? Is there?
Oh, I didn't. That's why I didn't get selected or
Okay.
advanced. Like, for me, it was kind of a filter, right? Like, when I was recruiting after graduation, a lot of firms would ask something like, give me the Fibonacci, give me the nth number of the Fibonacci sequence without using recursion. And it's like, literally, I can Google that in 10 seconds and get an answer, right? Now, you
Yeah.
should be able to do this, and all good quants should be able to do this in their sleep, and everybody knows that. Or you could just copy it. But I didn't want to copy it. So whenever a firm would ask me for that, I would just post the Google link. So it was clear it was not my work. And thankfully, my current employer found that funny. Not all employers found that as funny, but that's kind of how I manage that. So, but again, I'm mid-career. So if I'm interviewing for a job with brain teasers and Fibonacci sequences, it's probably not the right fit for me. So don't follow my example. Like there's Dan Stefanica's book that's fantastic. There's the Green Book. I can't remember. There's like 3 books on Amazon that are preparing for quant interviews. You should read them. All the kids who did the best in recruiting seem to always carry those books around with them.
Okay, perfect.
And it's kind of like you can't be fooled by the same brain teaser twice. Po-Shin Lo, he's a Carnegie Mellon professor. He's he's the coach for the U.S. Math Olympiad teams. He has some really great videos on YouTube as well for problem solving and how to think through these kind of brain teasers. But they're important, so you should prepare them, and it's kind of like taking the GRE. That's how I looked at it. The GRE is not really hard. It's just how disciplined are you and how can you play the game, right? Like I got my math score up to like ludicrous level of improvement on the GRE, and I got a perfect on the verbal, but that's just because I practiced, and it's not that's all it showed, right?
Yeah. So it's the
Same, what's that?
Yeah, so just prepare, essentially.
Yeah. So for the sell side, brain teasers are pretty important, and you use those with books. 2 is HackerRank in like leak code kind of challenges. And this is an area that you just should probably be spending an hour to 2 hours. Like if you haven't done this yet, this would be if you could only do one thing, I would say HackerRank and leak code, because the companies have to screen for quant talent, right? And what's the best way to screen for quant talent? And the answer is, well, give them difficult algorithmic problems under pressure. But these problems aren't necessarily difficult. It's like they just require algorithmic thinking, which is something, it's like playing piano. You just have to develop with practice. I say that with all the confidence of somebody who didn't invest enough time in this. The students who did really well in recruiting seem to know this coming in and had already like spent tons of time on HackerRank and leak code. It's worth typically getting the premier membership. It's like $70 a year or something, but then you get to see the answers, because for me, I hadn't seen any of the answers. So it was really important to be able to be able to kind of see some of the examples of the code. I got better, certainly better, but these are problems that you typically wouldn't solve in practice. So anyway, so HackerRank and leak code. The interview format is typically online assessment. How do I spell assessment? And that's coding challenges. There's some psychometric. I think JP Morgan has a psychometric one, where they're asking you like questions about personality, about fit. You're doing like a bunch of silly little games to, that they can somehow deduce important stuff from. I mean, JP Morgan's pretty smart, so I imagine there's something to that. The challenge with these is there are networks of students that post the answers to these online.
Yeah.
So it is kind of gamed a bit. And then like folks will do the interviews in a group setting. They can't really monitor these to the extent that maybe they should. So like one person would do it, 10 people would watch. Like I've heard about stuff like that. I would recommend against that. And the reason is this: when I was working in an industry at a quant equity firm, I almost didn't go to Carnegie Mellon. We actually had, I guess the school doesn't matter, but we had a student who crushed the coding challenges to get into Acadian's internship program while I was still working there, but then wasn't very productive. And I talked to his manager, who I was friends with and worked with for years, and said, I'm thinking about going to schools. He said, well, I'm not sure this is a good school, because this student here like did really well in the interviews, but was kind of useless during the summer. And this other student from this other school, I gave like 4 projects this summer. I couldn't give him enough work. And this other one barely struggled through 1. And it was just, I don't know where that disconnect is, but something's not right going on in school. Now, maybe you don't care about the school's reputation, but maybe you probably do care about getting a return offer. So it's really important to make sure that the internship's the right fit. So again, not looking to be Pollyanna with the ethics, but it's something to consider. So sell-side recruiting is kind of biased towards the fall. A lot of people will start getting called into super days in September and October. Don't worry if that doesn't work. Magnus Silderson. I'll write that down. He's shoot. He's an MIT alum. He just gave the commencement speech for MIT MFin. I'll post it. This guy has the best advice ever in terms of how to think through a program, because like there are kids who will get the best grades, there are kids who will get the best internships, but that doesn't necessarily always mean the best outcome. Everything I'm trying to suggest here, I'm trying to play the long game. I don't think it's right to just optimize for your immediate internship. I think you should really like try to find an internship that's going to give you the chance to succeed. So, sell side, let's talk about the differences between the sell side and the buy side. So sell side is like trading, commonly like a broker dealer. And also origination. So a company wants to IPO, they want to do a bond issue, they're talking to the sell side. This is typically iBanking. And this is sales and trading. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to drive asset owners and other broker dealers to trade with the bank. So whatever bank you're working at, and that's the sell side. So on the trading desk, it's usually pretty intense. There's a couple of different ways that they work. A couple of big themes going on right now are the LIBOR transition. All these derivative securities are being migrated off of LIBOR. You can Google about that. Another big topic is fixed income, like bond automated trading. That's another big area of growth for these. Obviously, algorithmic trading. And there's a lot of CMU alums who are very prominent in that. Nick Saris teaches a course in algorithmic trading. It's a fantastic course. I highly recommend it. And this is kind of like using tick data to try to do very, very short-term forecasts and understanding, how securities are actually trading. So LIBOR transition, fixed income automation, if you think about it, most bond trades happen over the phone. Somebody calls somebody and they do a trade. That a lot of that's getting automated. The question is, how do you price a bond in an automated fashion when it's a huge market and it's not very liquid? So very ripe with disruption. So for these, like derivative pricing is very important. They're going to ask like all the StoCal questions are going to be for these. Like I because of my currency background, I ended up getting a lot of kind of solutions where they structure custom exotic derivatives for asset owners or corporates. And they asked me a lot of like Brownian motion kind of questions and those sort of things. Stefanica's book, I think, covers that particularly well, especially the newer edition. I'll just write that. Stefanica, Dan is the, I think, director of the Baruch program. They just do a really nice job of that. So for so that's kind of the sell side. You can kind of also think of this in terms of like front office, back office, and middle office. That's another kind of important, and this is on both the buy side and the sell side. So back office are your accounting, settlement, right? So front office makes trade decisions. There's, they're also allocation of capital. All your handsome salespeople and this crew are generally considered front office. Some execution is front office because it really comes close to trade decisions. But some people don't consider it that. Middle office is like risk, and again, I'm not sure I'm completely right on these, so double check it. This is kind of how I think about it. So risk management is like middle office. Performance measurement is maybe closer to back office than risk management, because risk is typically Risk is typically like maybe a more qualified role, requires quite a bit more math and computational trading. I just happen to come from that area. So for me, like everything relates back to that, right? But comp generally goes in this direction with from high to low, where front office obviously is kind of the target if you want to maximize comp. There's a lot more career volatility in terms of the front office. You'll be changing jobs more. Comp is going to be a lot more volatile. There's a lot of work-life balance is maybe less in the front office. Back office is and middle office tend to have more stable hours, very good work-life balance. But also you're subject to like outsourcing at any given point. So it's kind of a question. I mean, one of the themes for me, just stepping back at a high level, what are the impacts of COVID, right? If we don't need to be in the offices, why do they need to pay somebody $150,000 to be a quant analyst in New York when just with differences in purchasing power parity, you can pay somebody a fifth of that in a different country, and maybe even get better things. So that pressure is very much in my mind in terms of thinking about how the industry is evolving. So we talked about sell side, we talked about back office, middle office, and front office. Plug for Magnus again, really look at that. Let's think now about the buy side a little bit. The buy side tends to start recruiting a little bit later, and not May certainly, but maybe later in the fall. And this is for internships, right? And then for the buy side interviews are typically going to be, so buy sides, what's the buy side? That's investment companies, investment firms. Maybe better to call them asset managers. And we'll see why that matters in a second. Asset managers. So that's like a lot of quantitative asset managers. I would say AQR, Acadian, where I came from, really great firm. GMO. These are just some Wellington. You can look these up, but these are typical, like considered like asset managers. Now, some of these may have like hedge fund groups within them, but the bulk of their business is like long only asset management. You can think of like asset owners also as on the buy side. Asset owners are like pension funds, endowments, insurance companies are maybe somewhere in the middle here. Right, because they own a pool of assets and maybe they have, like Manulife in Canada, they own John Hancock Investment Management, but John Hancock is also an insurance company. So it's like very often the insurance distribution channel is also selling investments. Buy side is generally where people go after the sell side. It's kind of difficult to go from the buy side back to the sell side, but like think of it as if you're a doctor, you want to do your residency. And residency is like 120 hours a week. It's grueling, but you learn a ton. You cram like, 12 years of professional experience into your 4 years of residency in the medical profession. Legal profession has a similar concept for the associate period. And it's, like 3 or 4 years of hell, and then you reach the promised land. Generally, and I think this is devolving a little bit, but generally the sell side to buy side progression is what that used to look like. Right. So buy side, what do the interviews look like on buy side? The large managers like the BlackRocks of the world, a lot of them use like the higher view. BlackRock's, Goldman Sachs Asset Management, Invesco. Maybe the first, I don't know about Invesco. I'm kind of making that up. The first round is going to be like a higher view. Their questions are going to be more data focused. So instead of like price my derivative or do this complex algorithm, you're going to get like a data set and you're going to use like Python, to find something interesting or like build a signal. Now, I really appreciated Carnegie Mellon's data science curriculum because they do a great job of preparing for this. But the first thing you want to do whenever you get a data set is analyze it for data quality. And probably most intern candidates get like tossed out of a process because they build this compelling signal, but it's a trap because they either have like collinear variables in there or they have like missing data. And you didn't, most early career folks assume the data is good. It never is. So you have to not only be able to identify the data breaks, but do that. And I think in the pre-MFE, MSCF, the data science class does a really great job. I just had a question at work the other day and I used that. So the buy side is going to be a lot more personality based. They're going to want to talk to you. So I get not personality, I guess behavioral interview is the way you want to think about it. MIT's career office has a really good behavioral interview prep series. And these are like, tell me about your biggest failure. And, maybe more naive people in these, like, or what's your biggest weakness? And like a terrible answer to that is like the weaknesses that are actually strengths, like I care too much. Go to hell. Come on, dude. I care too much. I work too hard. I don't know when to stop. Like, it's important to really think through these questions and be honest as you can, from my point of view, because you're going to end up working with these folks, and even at the internship level, you want to be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because companies are very different. I made an incredibly wonderful company, really great products. I was interviewing with, and the interviews were just very challenging and contentious, and kind of asking these very arcane concepts from a lot of them I remember from CFA level 2, and it was just kind of this like gotcha environment, and it was like I could always look that up, but like it just wasn't a fit because they wanted, it was a fundamental shop that was looking to build out a quant team. And they really put a lot of value on these concepts that are like, in some of those books behind me, and I really engaged with them earlier, but I haven't touched them in the 2 years I've been in school. Yeah. So my bad for not prepping, but also that job was not going to be a good fit in any universe. So if we're talking about like the hierarchy of where you want to be, let's talk about another subset of buy side, and that's proprietary trading. So before the Volcker rule, after the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, you can figure out the dates. The Volcker rule, one of the things was banks could no longer engage in proprietary trading. That means they had to keep fairly neutral order books. They couldn't look to profit substantially on order flow or anything normally than they needed for trading. I don't know the specifics, but in Chicago in particular, there was, in Amsterdam and a lot of places that were really integrated with the options markets. This prop trading came up where it's sort of like market making, but you're trying to identify arbitrage opportunities within the market, trade off of the firm's capital. These firms typically have no clients. Most of them tend to have like their internal capital. Very, very selective and incredibly high comp. We mentioned our friend from Dublin. He's at one of these firms. So, think of it as like Jane Street, names are escaping, Uptiver, Acuna. There's a bunch of smaller ones as well. You can look these up and find these. I didn't even know a lot about this before I went to the program, but these tend to be very even the Chicago Trading Company, they're really great on. Carnegie Mellon has the track, and if you can travel, you'll go visit these folks. They're phenomenal. It's kind of a sink or swim culture where you're either making money for the firm or you're not. It's very narrow focus, so you might be trading single stock derivatives and just trade that all day, something like that. But the comp is really high. I think I mentioned that. Exit opportunities can be pretty good, but you're going to be like, and again, these are generalizations from the outside, so you should absolutely confirm with people who are on the inside. This is just like kind of what I understood about it. As you kind of migrate to your own firm or work on your own kind of desk, a lot of these are going to be, call it, small shops, very individualistic mindset, not high team orientation, but they're making pretty good money. So that's another area. So as you're kind of looking, the kind of the hierarchy goes like really competitive places are prop shops, hedge funds. Those are really good on the buy side. Some of the S&T desks, like, and you'll see like some of the desks are just doing very innovative work and really just crushing it in terms of intellectual development. And I think it looks good for their future. Other ones are just kind of going along. I'm going to move these over a little bit because we've kind of been going on like right's desirable, left is not. So these are like highly selective. And then, you kind of move a little bit, like maybe I don't get those, then like asset managers it's not that they're less selective and they're great places to work. It's just, I'm trying to give like a hierarchy of like where the cool kids go. And again, I work like at asset management. It's a really important part. So this isn't to say that these guys are any better than these guys or even these guys. Just want to give like general hierarchy. Asset managers, let's see who else would be in that category. Well, asset managers is probably a big one. I guess on the sell side, maybe we'd even want to do something like this, like put asset managers here, and then okay, so maybe that didn't work out. So maybe we're looking at like pension funds. And some of these are actually in endowments, and sovereign wealth funds also pay very well. Asset management, some bank jobs here I'm going to put, here, like we'll just leave that a little bit vague for now. Sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, insurance companies, they have a lot of data science needs. And then like maybe over here is like vendors. But again, this is how the hierarchy, as I understood it when I was there, but this is constantly evolving. Like for me, I think a growing trend is a lot of these vendors are going to put a lot of these folks are going to become competitors with a lot of the ideas of embedded finance and a lot of the fintech models. So don't take this as like stone tablets of truth and this is how it is. This is like a snapshot when I was really investigating this 3 years ago, and I'm already seeing the dynamics evolve. But like what I can say is like when somebody gets an internship at Jane Street or Susquehanna International Group, SIG, everyone's like, whoa, that's so awesome. If you get like a risk management internship, people aren't as excited. And again, I kind of don't care about that as much because I think it's like somewhat outdated information. I know during 2008, if you were in risk management, you could name your price, right? A lot of these are very highly correlated with the market, and that's something very important to kind of think about.
If a student was targeting a buy-side internship, should they wait until October time to start applying for roles, or would you like, is there, like you mentioned buy side starts recruiting October, November, around then. Should you wait until then, or should you start applying for sell side positions earlier?
No, what I'd say is, how to put it, there's a certain art to interviewing. So you just want to get as many, like
Yeah,
in Carnegie Mellon Career Services, you'll see they really, not a plug for CMU, I just think they do a great job in terms of like setting things up. Like you don't go for your number one company right out of the gates. You apply to like your 2 through 10 companies and work your way up to the number one in like a week or two. Give yourself some time, some experience. What I would say is you have to be constantly scanning. And so where do you get info? So Indeed.com is a good website. A lot of schools use Handshake for advertising internships. A lot of companies use Handshake. Career fairs are a good chance to make initial contact with the companies. I don't know if like Carnegie Mellon are doing the treks. I almost didn't go on the treks because, I was mid-career. I am so glad I did. The visits to Chicago in particular, they do Chicago, New York, and Boston for the treks. And Chicago was eye-opening. It was a whole section of the industry I really didn't even know anything about. Citadel, Optiver, and some fantastic people who I would absolutely not ever be qualified in a million years to work for. But it was really important for me to learn about that part of the industry. But treks are really useful. I'd prioritize those. And then company websites as well. Networking is also really big. Networking, you have to be careful though. I got a lot of emails when I was in industry from like, hi, I'm blah, blah from blah, blah. Can I talk about, whatever you're doing? And it's like, I don't know, but if I met somebody at an event, I'd be glad to speak with them,
yeah,
and really do that. Other students, very underappreciated source of information, especially you'll see certain cohorts of students have very good information networks. Like, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but they tend to pass on information from class to class really well. So when I walked in, I remember one of the first days at Carnegie Mellon, I was shocked at students who had just come out of university knew more about some of the dynamics of recruiting than I did, because they kind of like had this information passed on to them. So that's a really good resource. So what you want to do is like keep up to date. I originally tried tracking all the jobs that I applied for. It just wasn't possible. You spend more time inputting the stuff into a spreadsheet.
actually, yeah,
That said, I would look at like what my interests were. The sooner you can kind of narrow in, the central tension here is like, what job do you want? And the answer is something like whatever job I can get with the highest comp. The problem is that's not focused enough, and you really need to focus and kind of like narrow in very quickly. And understand that if you're getting rejected for a lot of interviews, that's feedback. That's important feedback. When I wasn't making it through any of the sell side rounds, I realized that, like mid-career, moving to New York, working 90 hours a week is an entry. And I don't know if this is actually how the work-life balance works out. A lot of that's changing, but like, I don't know that being like an entry analyst on a big sell side desk is the move for me. And the fact that they didn't want me either was a good data point, right? Like,
yeah,
who wants a 40-year-old guy in the interns? But startups found me really interesting because they needed folks who could do a lot of different things. And a lot of early stage hedge funds, asset managers, I had really good luck with because my biography was such that I really didn't fit into any kind of a pipeline. Asset management shops, it was challenging because it was like, okay, you're 40, you did some maybe useful work for a firm in the past, maybe not super quantitative, but you figured out how to be useful, and that's good. but the manager, hiring manager might be like 28 or 35 or, whatever. It's like, do I want to work with some guy who's, I don't know what the dynamics are? And the answer is probably not. I mean, I got some really good interviews and made some good relationships, but that was information for me. And so it's like, I really narrowed in on a subset of companies. And once I did that, as I was kind of wrapping up my program, I had a really big job that ended up not coming through. And when I realized it wasn't coming through, I think in the middle of May, I started kind of applying to a lot of places. And I ended up in active process with 31 different companies. So at not all at once, it was like average of 12 to 15 at any given time. But I was either advancing or getting fallen out of all these opportunities. But it was because I'd really focused and understood why it could be useful for a firm and was able to express that in the cover letter. Now, cover letters get a bad rap. They're kind of generally seen as a waste of time. I found them to be a useful differentiator, especially if they're optional, because nobody does it, right? So, and we can talk about this maybe in another time, but writing a very succinct cover letter ended up being a good differentiator for me, because it kind of gave me a chance to make a case why they should take a risk on somebody who's like not a standard student, right?
Yeah.
Man, I talked a lot. I'm sorry. I hope some of it was useful.
Oh no, it was all brilliant. Yeah, thanks a million. Yeah, that covered pretty much, that covered a load there.
No, man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's a great thing. Would it be okay if I shared this with other students in the course as well? It might be of benefit to them as well. Or
Yeah,
I can share it.
absolutely.
If you are putting this up on YouTube, I can just share the link, and you can boost your views from there maybe.
Yeah, I don't want to be an influencer. The funny story happened with Quantstu. Like my wife and I, we were having our third kid in the summer of last year. So, parental leave during internship is just an awkward conversation. So I just tapped out of the internship process altogether. But a lot of really good students from our school and a couple of other schools had their internship offers rescinded during the pandemic. So a couple of us got to thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool if we just had something to show for the summers? So we had the idea of like, maybe we'd replicate some well-known quant finance papers and talk about it and share our work with each other and also help keep each other on track. I figured like 8 or 9 students top would join this, and suddenly there were like more than 500 like interested, and so this group came up called Quantstu on LinkedIn, and we had a really good summer, and then I totally dropped off the map when school got hard. But we had like the head of AI from Fidelity as a guest, like watching somebody else's presentation. So it also got some folks at a couple of Boston area asset managers. It got some industry attention, and it was, I think, really useful for the folks who presented. And I felt good about it, but it ended up leading my current job, because it was a regular attendee of Quantstu who connected me with the firm I'm at now. And it was very fortuitous in that way. So I do kind of want to give back, because the job I have now, I'm really happy with, and I wouldn't have it without Quantstu. So to the extent it'd be useful, I'd be glad to post it. If you wanted to post it, I kind of don't care about the views. I just want to get it out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. No, that was, yeah, it definitely is great information, in fairness.
So maybe you want to pause the recording part?